The morning sun barely broke through the gray clouds as 8-year-old Sophia stood in front of the tall iron gates of Academia Musical San Rafael. Her small hands gripped the straps of her backpack so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. The building in front of her looked more like a palace than a school, with its cream-colored walls, tall windows, and perfectly trimmed hedges that lined the entrance. Sophia had seen pictures of the academy before, but standing here in person felt completely different. Everything about this place screamed expensive. From the polished marble steps to the golden nameplate that gleamed near the entrance, it was clear that this wasn't a school for ordinary families like hers. She looked down at her uniform. It was clean and pressed, thanks to her mother who had stayed up late last night making sure every wrinkle was gone. But Sophia could tell it wasn't new. The fabric was slightly faded, and the hem had been let down twice already to keep up with her growing height. Her shoes were polished, but the scuff marks on the toes told stories of the previous owner who had worn them before her. Taking a deep breath, Sophia pushed open the gate and walked into the courtyard. Immediately, she felt eyes on her. Groups of students stood chatting near the fountain in the center of the courtyard. Their uniforms looked crisp and brand new. Many of them carried expensive leather bags. And Sophia noticed more than a few had the latest phone models. Peeking out of their pockets, she kept her head down and walked toward the main entrance, trying to make herself as invisible as possible. But invisibility wasn't something that came easy when you were the scholarship kid in a school full of wealthy children. "Is that the new girl?" she heard someone whisper. "Yeah, I heard she's here on some charity program," another voice responded, not even trying to be quiet about it. Sophia felt her cheeks burn, but she kept walking. Her mother had prepared her for this. "Hold your head high, Mia," she had said that morning while braiding Sophia's hair. "You earned that spot fair and square. Don't let anyone make you feel small, but right now." Walking through that courtyard with dozens of eyes following her every step, Sophia felt very small indeed. The inside of the academy was even more impressive than the outside. The hallways had high ceilings with crystal chandeliers hanging down. Large paintings of famous musicians decorated the walls, and through open doorways, Sophia could see music rooms equipped with instruments that probably cost more than her family's rent for an entire year. She found her way to the assembly hall, where all the students were gathering for the welcome ceremony. The hall was massive, rows of cushioned seats facing a stage where a grand piano sat like a crown jewel under the spotlight. Sophia slipped into a seat near the back, hoping to blend in with the crowd. More students filed in, filling the seats around her. A group of girls sat in the row in front of her, their hair perfectly styled and their accessories matching their uniforms. They chatted excitedly about their summer vacations, talking about trips to Europe and music camps in places Sophia had only seen in pictures. "My dad got me a new piano for my birthday," one girl said proudly. "It's a Steinway. The teacher said it's the best brand for serious musicians." "That's amazing, Valentina," her friend replied. "I've been taking private lessons all summer. Mrs. Delgado is going to be so impressed when she hears how much I've improved." At the mention of Mrs. Delgado's name, Sophia felt a small knot form in her stomach. Mrs. Delgado was the head piano instructor at the academy, and from what Sophia had heard, she was known for being extremely strict and having very high standards. The lights dimmed, and the director of the academy walked onto the stage. He was a tall man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He welcomed everyone back and talked about the academy's proud history and high standards. Then he mentioned the new scholarship program, designed to bring talented students from all backgrounds into the academy. "We believe that musical talent knows no economic boundaries," he said with a smile. "This year, we're proud to welcome several students who have shown exceptional promise and will be joining us through our community outreach initiative." Sophia heard whispers around her. Some students turned in their seats, clearly trying to figure out who the scholarship students were. She sank lower in her chair, wishing she could disappear completely. After the director finished his speech, he introduced the faculty members. One by one, teachers stood up and took a small bow as their names were called. Then came Mrs. Delgado. She was a woman in her mid-50s, dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, and sharp features that made her look perpetually stern. She wore an elegant black dress and walked with the kind of posture that suggested years of classical training. When she stood, the entire hall seemed to straighten up automatically. Mrs. Delgado's eyes swept across the audience as she gave a brief speech about excellence and dedication. Her gaze was intense, almost piercing, as if she could measure each student's worth with a single look. When her eyes passed over Sophia's section, Sophia could have sworn they paused for just a moment, and something cold flickered in them. After the assembly ended, students were directed to their respective classes. Sophia followed the crowd to the piano wing of the building, where Mrs. Delgado's classroom was located. The room was spacious and bright, with 6 grand pianos arranged in 2 rows. Large windows let in natural light. The walls were covered with posters of famous composers and music theory charts. Students began taking their seats at the pianos, clearly familiar with where they belonged. Sophia stood near the doorway, unsure of where to go. "You must be Sophia," Mrs. Delgado's voice cut through the chatter. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look. "Yes, ma'am," Sophia replied quietly. Mrs. Delgado looked her up and down, her expression unreadable. "I see. Well, since all the main pianos are taken by our returning students, you'll be using the practice keyboard in the back corner." Sophia followed Mrs. Delgado's pointing finger to see a small electric keyboard set up on a desk in the far corner of the room, separated from the grand pianos by several feet. It was clearly meant to be an inferior spot, away from the center of attention. "Yes, ma'am," Sophia said again, making her way to the corner as whispers erupted around the room as she sat down at the small keyboard. Sophia could feel the stares of the other students. The girl named Valentina, who sat at the piano closest to Mrs. Delgado's desk, leaned over to her friend and whispered something that made them both giggle. Mrs. Delgado clapped her hands sharply. "Settle down, everyone. We have a lot of work to do this semester. I expect nothing but excellence from this class. Those who cannot keep up will find themselves moved to a lower level." Her eyes flickered toward Sophia's corner as she said this, and the message was clear. Sophia stared down at the keys of her small keyboard, feeling her throat tighten. This wasn't how she had imagined her first day would go. She had been so excited about this opportunity, so grateful for the chance to study at such a prestigious academy. Her mother had cried happy tears when the acceptance letter arrived, but now, sitting in this corner, separated from the other students, with Mrs. Delgado's cold gaze making it clear she didn't belong, Sophia wondered if this opportunity was going to be the blessing she had hoped for, or something much harder to endure. She took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the keyboard keys. Whatever happened, she promised herself she wouldn't give up. Her grandmother had taught her better than that. 3 weeks had passed since Sophia's first day at Academia Musical San Rafael, and those weeks had been some of the hardest of her young life. Every single day felt like a test she hadn't studied for, a challenge she wasn't sure she could overcome. Mrs. Delgado had made it perfectly clear from day one that Sophia didn't belong. While other students received encouraging smiles and patient corrections, Sophia got sharp looks and dismissive comments. When Valentina played a piece with several mistakes, Mrs. Delgado would say, "Good effort, dear. Let's work on those tricky sections together." But when Sophia played something perfectly, the best she got was a curt nod and adequate. The other students had picked up on Mrs. Delgado's attitude quickly. Children have a way of sensing these things, of knowing who the teacher favors and who they don't. Some students ignored Sophia completely, as if she was invisible. Others were more direct with their exclusion, moving their bags to save seats for friends whenever Sophia approached during lunch. But Sophia kept showing up. Every morning, she walked through those iron gates with her second-hand uniform and her worn backpack. Every day, she sat in that back corner at her small keyboard while the other students practiced on their grand pianos. And every evening, she went home to her grandmother's tiny apartment, where they would practice together on an old electronic keyboard that had seen better days. It was a Tuesday morning when everything changed. Sophia walked into Mrs. Delgado's classroom to find an unusual energy in the air. Students were chattering more excitedly than usual, and there was a tension that Sophia couldn't quite place. Mrs. Delgado stood at the front of the room, her hands clasped behind her back, wearing an expression that could only be described as predatory. She waited until every student had taken their seat before speaking. "Class," she announced, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife. "Today we're going to do something different, something spontaneous." The room fell completely silent. Mrs. Delgado rarely did spontaneous things. Everything in her class was planned, structured, controlled. "I want to assess your natural talent," she continued, walking slowly between the rows of pianos. "Not just your ability to practice and memorize, but your innate musicality. Your feel for the instrument." She paused dramatically, letting her words sink in. "Each of you will come to the performance piano." She gestured to the beautiful black grand piano at the front of the room, the one that was rarely used except for special occasions. "And you will play something for the class. Anything you know by heart. This will show me who among you truly has the gift." Excited murmurs rippled through the classroom. Students sat up straighter, clearly eager to show off. These were children who had been groomed for moments like this, who had performed at recitals since they could barely reach the pedals. Mrs. Delgado began calling names, starting with her favorite students. Valentina went first, playing a Mozart piece that was technically correct, but somehow lacked emotion. Still, Mrs. Delgado praised her warmly. "Beautifully controlled, Valentina. You can see the quality of your training." Next was Diego, a boy whose father apparently owned half the businesses in the city. He played Chopin, stumbling over several passages, but recovering quickly. Mrs. Delgado smiled at him kindly. "Excellent attempt. Diego, that's a challenging piece. And you handled it with confidence." One by one, students went up. Some played well, others made mistakes. But all of them received encouraging words from Mrs. Delgado. She praised their technique, their feeling, their bravery in performing. Sophia sat in her corner, her heart beginning to race. She had a terrible feeling about where this was going. With each name called, with each student who performed, the knot in her stomach grew tighter. Then, after about 10 students had gone, Mrs. Delgado turned toward the back of the room. Her eyes locked onto Sophia, and a small smile played at the corners of her mouth. It wasn't a kind smile. "Sophia," she called out, her voice carrying clearly across the room. "Why don't you come up next?" The classroom went quiet in a different way now. It was the kind of silence that comes before something uncomfortable happens. It's the kind that makes you want to look away, but you can't. Sophia's hands began to tremble. She stood up slowly, her legs feeling like they might give out beneath her. Every step toward that grand piano felt like walking through deep water behind her. She heard whispers. "This should be interesting," someone muttered. "I bet she doesn't even know how to play properly," another voice added. Mrs. Delgado stood beside the piano, waiting. As Sophia approached, the teacher's smile grew wider. She spoke just loud enough for the students in the front rows to hear. "Let's see what our scholarship student can do," she said, emphasizing the word scholarship like it was something shameful. "I'm very curious to see what kind of talent earned you that special spot at our academy." A few students giggled. Valentina leaned over to whisper something to Diego. They both smirked. Sophia reached the piano bench and stood there for a moment, staring at the keys. The instrument was beautiful, far nicer than anything she had ever played on. The black surface was so polished she could see her reflection in it, a small girl who looked terrified. "We're waiting," Mrs. Delgado said, her voice dripping with false patience. She crossed her arms and stepped back, making it clear this was a performance, a spectacle for the class to witness. Sophia sat down on the bench, and immediately she felt how different it was from her corner keyboard. The bench was the perfect height, cushioned and comfortable. The keys looked pristine, untouched by the wear and tear of constant use. Her hands hovered over the keys, shaking visibly now. She could feel every eye in the room on her. She could hear the suppressed giggles, the whispers that weren't quite quiet enough. Mrs. Delgado sighed dramatically. "Whenever you're ready, dear. Though if you don't know anything well enough to perform, you can simply say so. There's no shame in admitting when something is beyond your level." That comment sparked more laughter from the class. Sophia felt tears beginning to burn behind her eyes, threatening to spill over. This was exactly what Mrs. Delgado wanted, she realized. This wasn't about assessing talent. This was about humiliation. This was about putting Sophia in her place. It's about proving to everyone that she didn't belong here. The worst part was that Sophia couldn't even blame the other students for going along with it. They were just following their teacher's lead, taking their cues from an adult they trusted and respected. Sophia's vision blurred slightly as the tears gathered. Her throat felt tight. She wanted to run from the room, to leave this place and never come back. She thought about her mother, who worked double shifts to help pay for her school supplies. She thought about her grandmother, who spent hours every evening teaching her, sharing the gift that had once defined her own life. "Perhaps you need more time to prepare," Mrs. Delgado suggested, her tone falsely sympathetic. "It's perfectly understandable if you're not ready to perform at this level yet. Not everyone has had the advantages of private tutoring and years of lessons." Something shifted inside Sophia at those words. Yes, she hadn't had expensive private tutors. Yes, she didn't have a Steinway piano at home. But she had something these other students didn't have. She had her grandmother, a woman who had once played in concert halls, who had felt music in her soul before life had taken those opportunities away, and her grandmother had taught her something more important than just how to press the right keys. She had taught her that music wasn't about showing off or following rules perfectly. Music was about feeling, about expression, about pouring your heart into every note. Sophia took a deep breath. She closed her eyes, blocking out the classroom, blocking out Mrs. Delgado's cruel smile, blocking out the whispers and the giggles. In her mind, she was back in her grandmother's small apartment. With the smell of cooking and the sound of traffic outside the window, she thought of the countless evenings they had spent together, her grandmother's weathered hands guiding hers across the keys. She remembered the stories her abuela told about playing for audiences who were moved to tears, about the power music had to touch something deep in the human soul. Sophia placed her fingers on the keys, and in that moment, something inside her became very still and very certain. This wasn't about proving anything to Mrs. Delgado or to these students who had never wanted her here in the first place. This was about honoring everything her grandmother had taught her. This was about showing that real talent couldn't be measured by the price of your uniform or the size of your house. The classroom held its breath, waiting to see if the scholarship girl would embarrass herself. They had no idea what was about to happen. Sophia's fingers touched the keys, and for a brief moment, the entire world seemed to pause. She could still hear the muffled giggles behind her, still feel Mrs. Delgado's satisfied smirk burning into her back. But something had shifted inside her chest, something quiet and powerful. She began to play. The first notes of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata floated into the air, soft and haunting. It started gently, almost like a whisper, and the giggles in the classroom died immediately. The melody was so delicate, so careful, that it demanded silence. Sophia's eyes remained closed. Her fingers moved across the keys with a grace that seemed impossible for someone her age, someone who practiced on a cheap keyboard in a cramped apartment. But this wasn't about the instrument she learned on. It was about something deeper, something that couldn't be bought or taught in expensive private lessons. The notes began to build, layer upon layer of emotion weaving together into something beautiful. Sophia wasn't just playing the right keys in the right order. She was telling a story without words, painting pictures with sound. Each note carried weight, carried meaning, carried a piece of her heart. In her mind, she was no longer in that classroom. She was in her grandmother's apartment on a rainy evening, the two of them sitting side by side at the old keyboard. She could hear her abuela's voice, soft and encouraging. "Music is not about perfection, Mia," her grandmother would say. "It's about truth. When you play, you must play what you feel. Let the sadness be sad. Let the joy be joyful. Don't hide from the emotion. That's where the real music lives." And so, Sophia played with everything she had. She played for her mother, who worked until her hands ached so Sophia could have this opportunity. She played for her grandmother, who had given up her own dreams, but never let the music die. She played for every moment of loneliness she had felt in these past 3 weeks. Every whisper she had pretended not to hear, every time she had been made to feel like she didn't belong. The music swelled, moving through the complicated middle passages that had taken Sophia months to master. Her fingers danced across the keys with increasing intensity, each note perfectly timed, yet somehow spontaneous, as if the music was being created in that very moment rather than following a centuries-old composition. Mrs. Delgado's smug expression had begun to falter. Her mouth, which had been curved in that cruel smile, slowly relaxed into a straight line. Her eyes, which had been narrow with satisfaction, widened slightly. She took an involuntary step backward. The students who had been whispering and giggling sat frozen in their seats. Valentina's mouth had fallen open. Diego leaned forward, his previous smirk completely gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine awe. A girl named Carolina, who had never spoken a single word to Sophia, had her hand pressed against her chest, as if the music was physically affecting her. The melody moved through its phases, sometimes soft as a lullaby, sometimes powerful as a storm. Sophia's whole body moved with the music, swaying slightly as her hands worked magic on the keys. Tears had begun streaming down her face, but she didn't notice. She was completely lost in the piece, in the emotion, in the pure act of creation. This was what her grandmother had been talking about all those evenings. This was what it meant to really play, to pour your soul into the music and let it speak the things that words could never express. Sophia played the loneliness of being different, the strength of her family's love, the determination to prove that she belonged anywhere. She had the courage to stand. The other students who had performed before her had played technically correct pieces. They had hit the right notes, kept proper tempo, demonstrated their training. But Sophia was doing something entirely different. She was making them feel something. She was reaching into her chest, pulling out her heart, and sharing it with everyone in that room. Mrs. Delgado's face had gone pale. Her hands, which had been confidently crossed over her chest, now hung loosely at her sides. She looked like someone who had just watched their entire understanding of the world crack and shift.
Ow.
The piano teacher had spent decades in music, had taught hundreds of students, had trained at prestigious conservatories, and she was watching an 8-year-old scholarship student play with a depth of emotion that she rarely witnessed even in professional performers. As the piece moved toward its conclusion, Sophia's playing became softer again, bringing the journey full circle. The notes fell like gentle rain, each one perfectly placed, perfectly timed, perfectly felt. The final passages were so delicate that several students found themselves holding their breath, afraid that even breathing might disturb the magic happening in that room. And then, Sophia played the final note. It hung in the air, resonating through the silence. Fading slowly until there was nothing left but the memory of it, Sophia opened her eyes. For a moment, she had forgotten where she was. She had been so deep, in the music, so lost in the emotion of it, that returning to the present felt jarring. She blinked, her vision still blurry with tears, and slowly became aware of her surroundings again. The classroom was completely, utterly silent. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. It was as if the entire room had been placed under a spell and nobody knew how to break it. Sophia turned slightly on the bench, looking at the sea of faces staring back at her. Every single student was looking at her with an expression she had never seen directed at her before. Not pity, not mockery, not indifference, something else entirely. Something that looked almost like respect, mixed with shock. Mixed with an emotion that took Sophia a moment to recognize. Wonder. Mrs. Delgado stood exactly where she had been when Sophia started playing, but she looked completely different. Her face had lost all its color. Her mouth was slightly open, as if she had been about to say something and forgot how to form words. Her eyes were wide, staring at Sophia like she was seeing her for the first time. The silence stretched on, becoming almost uncomfortable. Sophia wiped at her tears with the back of her hand, suddenly self-conscious. Had she done something wrong? Had she played it incorrectly? Maybe her grandmother had taught her a different version, and she had embarrassed herself without even knowing it. But then, in the back of the classroom, a sound broke the spell. One student, a quiet boy named Raphael who sat near the windows, began to clap. It was slow at first, deliberate, the sound echoing in the silent room. Then another student joined in. Then another. Within seconds, the entire classroom erupted in applause. Students were clapping hard, some even standing up from their seats. Valentina was clapping, her expression stunned. Diego was clapping, shaking his head in disbelief. Carolina had tears in her own eyes as she applauded. The sound was overwhelming, washing over Sophia like a wave. She sat at the piano bench, overwhelmed, confused, relieved, and terrified all at once. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but these were different from the ones that had fallen while she played. These were tears of release, of relief, of the sudden understanding that maybe, just maybe, she had proven something important. Mrs. Delgado still hadn't moved. She stood frozen as her students gave a standing ovation to the girl she had tried to humiliate. Her mouth opened and closed several times, like a fish gasping for air. When she finally managed to speak, her voice came out rough and uncertain, lacking all the confidence and cruelty it had held just minutes before. That was, she started, then stopped. She cleared her throat, trying to regain some composure, but her hands were shaking slightly. That was adequate. The word fell flat in the room, completely at odds with what everyone had just witnessed. Several students turned to look at their teacher with confused expressions. Even they could tell that what they had just heard wasn't merely adequate. It was extraordinary. Mrs. Delgado seemed to realize how ridiculous her comments sounded. Straightened her shoulders, trying to pull together some shred of authority. "You may return to your seat." Sophia stood on shaky legs and walked back to her corner, but this time the walk felt different. Students' eyes followed her, but not with mockery or judgment. Some nodded at her as she passed. One girl even smiled, a real, genuine smile. As Sophia sat down at her small keyboard, she noticed movement near the doorway. Several teachers had gathered there, drawn by the sound of the music. They stood in the hallway, looking into the classroom with impressed expressions. One of them, an older man with kind eyes whom Sophia recognized as Maestra Rodriguez, caught her eye and gave her an approving nod. Mrs. Delgado noticed the teachers too, and her face flushed red. She clapped her hands sharply, trying to regain control of her classroom. "Well," she said, her voice too loud, too forced. "Let's continue. We have other students who need to perform." But something fundamental had changed in that room, and everyone could feel it. The girl in the corner wasn't invisible anymore. The rest of that day passed in a blur for Sophia. After her performance, Mrs. Delgado had continued with the class as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But everyone could sense the tension hanging in the air like thick fog. The teacher's voice had lost its usual sharp edge, and she avoided looking directly at Sophia for the remainder of the period. When the bell finally rang, Sophia gathered her things quickly, hoping to slip out unnoticed. But as she headed toward the door, something unexpected happened. Raphael, the quiet boy who had started the applause, stopped her in the hallway. "That was really amazing," he said, his voice sincere. "I've been taking piano lessons since I was 4, and I've never heard anyone our age play like that." Right. Before Sophia could respond, Carolina appeared beside them. "Where did you learn to play that way?" she asked, genuine curiosity in her eyes. "My teacher is always saying I need to play with more feeling, but I don't even know what that means." "You made it look so natural." Sophia felt her cheeks warm. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, especially not the positive kind. "My grandmother taught me," she said quietly. "She used to be a concert pianist a long time ago." "Really?" Carolina's eyes widened. "That's incredible. Do you think? I mean, would you maybe want to sit with us at lunch today?" Sophia looked at her in surprise. Carolina was one of the popular girls, always surrounded by friends, always laughing and included in everything. "You want me to sit with you?" "Of course," Carolina said with a smile. "Come on, I want to hear more about your grandmother." As they walked toward the cafeteria together, Sophia noticed other students looking at her differently. Some smiled as she passed. A few nodded in acknowledgement. It was such a stark contrast to the past 3 weeks that Sophia almost felt like she was dreaming, but not everyone was. Happy about Sophia's sudden recognition, Valentina stood with her group of friends near the lockers, her arms crossed, watching Sophia walk by with Carolina. The expression on her face was complicated, a mix of confusion and something that might have been jealousy. At lunch, Sophia found herself sitting at a table she never would have imagined being invited to. Carolina introduced her to other students, and they asked questions about her playing, about her grandmother, about how she learned such a difficult piece. For the first time since starting at the academy, Sophia felt like maybe she could belong here, but the real shift came later that afternoon. Sophia was heading to her next class when she heard her name being called over the school's intercom system. Sophia Martinez, please report to the director's office immediately. Being called to the director's office was never a good sign. Had Mrs. Delgado complained about her? Had she somehow broken a rule without knowing it? Sophia's mind raced with possibilities as she made her way through the hallways to the administrative wing. The director's office was located behind a heavy wooden door with a brass nameplate. Sophia knocked tentatively, her heart pounding. "Come in," a warm voice called from inside. Sophia pushed open the door to find not just the director, but also Maestro Rodriguez, the kind-eyed teacher who had watched her performance from the doorway. Both men were smiling, which immediately eased some of Sophia's anxiety. "Please sit down, Sophia," the director said, gesturing to a comfortable chair across from his desk. "You're not in any trouble. In fact, quite the opposite." Sophia sat down slowly, still not entirely convinced she wasn't about to be reprimanded for something. Maestro Rodriguez leaned forward, his eyes twinkling. "I happened to be walking past Mrs. Delgado's classroom this morning, and I heard your performance. Sophia, that was truly exceptional. I've been teaching at this academy for 25 years, and rarely have I heard such emotional depth from a student, especially one so young." The director nodded in agreement. "Several teachers reported hearing your playing. The word spreading through the faculty is quite remarkable. Tell me, where did you receive your training?" Sophia felt her throat tighten with emotion. "My grandmother taught me, sir. She used to perform professionally many years ago. We practiced together every evening on a keyboard in her apartment." The two men exchanged meaningful looks. Maestro Rodriguez spoke next. "And what's your grandmother's name, if you don't mind me asking?" "Elena Martinez," Sophia answered. "She played in concert halls when she was younger, before things got difficult for our family." The director's expression shifted to something like recognition. "Elena Martinez. The Elena Martinez who performed with the National Symphony in the 1980s? Sophia's eyes widened. "You know her?" "Know her?" Maestro Rodriguez laughed softly. "I saw her perform when I was a young teacher, just starting out. She was magnificent. I had no idea she had a granddaughter attending our academy." He paused, his expression becoming more serious. "Sophia, talent like yours, combined with the kind of teaching you've clearly received, is something special. It shouldn't be hidden away in a corner of the classroom." The director pulled out a folder from his desk. "We'd like to discuss some changes to your program here. First, we're moving you to the advanced piano class. It meets at a different time and is taught by Maestro Rodriguez himself." Sophia's mouth fell open. The advanced class was legendary at the academy, reserved only for the most promising students. "Additionally," the director continued, "we'd like to arrange for you to have access to one of our practice rooms with a proper grand piano. The keyboard in Mrs. Delgado's classroom simply isn't adequate for a student of your caliber. And there's one more thing," Maestro Rodriguez added, his smile growing wider. "We're planning the annual winter showcase in about 3 months. It's our biggest event of the year, attended by parents, alumni, and often some influential people from the music world. We'd be honored if you would perform a solo piece at the showcase." Sophia couldn't speak. Tears were welling up in her eyes again, but these were tears of joy, of disbelief, of overwhelming gratitude. Everything she had endured over the past 3 weeks, all the loneliness and exclusion and subtle cruelty, suddenly felt worth it for this moment. "I don't know what to say," she finally managed. "Thank you. Thank you so much. There's actually one more request," the director said gently. "We'd very much like to meet your grandmother. Would it be possible for her to come to the academy? Perhaps she could even be involved in your preparation for the showcase." Sophia nodded eagerly, wiping at her eyes. She would love that. She'd be so happy. As Sophia left the director's office, she felt like she was walking on air. The hallways looked different, brighter somehow. Everything that had seemed so intimidating 3 weeks ago now felt full of possibility. But as she rounded the corner, she nearly collided with Mrs. Delgado. The piano teacher stood in the corridor, and from the look on her face, it was clear she had been waiting. "Sophia," Mrs. Delgado said, her voice strained. For a long moment, she seemed to struggle with what to say next. Her face went through several expressions. Pride warring with something that might have been shame. "I heard you're being moved to the advanced class," she finally said. "Yes, ma'am," Sophia replied quietly. Mrs. Delgado nodded slowly. Her usual stern expression had cracked, showing something vulnerable underneath. "Your performance this morning was ... She paused, seeming to search for the right words. "It was remarkable. Truly remarkable." It wasn't an apology, not exactly. But there was something in her tone that acknowledged, without quite saying it, that she had been wrong about Sophia, that she had let her prejudices cloud her judgment, that she had almost missed recognizing genuine talent because of where that talent came from. "Thank you," Sophia said. Because she didn't know what else to say, Mrs. Delgado looked like she wanted to say more. But instead, she simply nodded again and walked away. Her shoulders slightly slumped in a way they had never been before. That evening, Sophia rushed home to tell her grandmother everything that had happened. She found her abuela in the kitchen, preparing dinner, humming an old melody. "Abuela," Sophia practically shouted, bursting through the door. "You won't believe what happened today." As she poured out the entire story, watching her grandmother's eyes fill with tears of pride and joy, Sophia realized something important. The cruelty she had faced, the attempt to humiliate her, had actually become the moment that changed everything. Mrs. Delgado had tried to prove Sophia didn't belong, and instead, Sophia had proven exactly the opposite. Her grandmother pulled her into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you, Mia. Not just because you played beautifully, but because you had the courage to share your gift, even when you were afraid. That takes a special kind of strength." "The director wants to meet you," Sophia said, pulling back to look at her grandmother's face. "And Maestro Rodriguez said he saw you perform years ago. He remembered you, abuela. He said you were magnificent." Elena's eyes sparkled with unshed tears. "Then I suppose I'll need to dig out my good dress," she said with a soft laugh. "Your old abuela is going back to the academy." Sophia hugged her again, feeling happier than she had in weeks. Tomorrow she would go to school, and for the first time she wouldn't be the scholarship student hiding in the corner. She would be Sofia Martinez, granddaughter of Elena Martinez, a pianist in her own right, and that made all the difference. 3 months passed like a dream Sophia never wanted to wake up from. The girl who had once sat alone in the corner of Mrs. Delgado's classroom was now thriving in ways she'd never imagined possible. The advanced class with Maestro Rodriguez was challenging but wonderful. He pushed his students hard, but always with encouragement and respect. Never with the cold dismissiveness Sophia had experienced before. The practice room the academy had given her access to became Sophia's sanctuary. It was a small space with soundproof walls, a beautiful grand piano, and a window that looked out onto the courtyard. She spent hours there after school, sometimes alone, sometimes with her grandmother, who would visit and offer guidance. Sharing stories from her own performing days, the other students had fully accepted Sophia now. Carolina had become a genuine friend, often studying with her in the library. Even Valentina had warmed up eventually, though it had taken time. One afternoon, she had approached Sophia in the hallway with an awkward expression. "Sorry," Valentina had said quietly, "for how I acted when you first got here. I was jealous, I think. My parents spend so much money on lessons, and you made it look effortless. I realize now that wasn't fair." Sophia had accepted the apology, understanding that sometimes people acted badly when they felt threatened or insecure. They weren't close friends now, but there was a mutual respect between them that hadn't existed before. But tonight was the night everything had been building toward. The winter showcase had finally arrived. Sophia stood backstage at the Academy's grand auditorium. Peeking through the curtain at the filling seats, the space was enormous, with velvet chairs arranged in perfect rows, and a stage that seemed to stretch forever. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting warm light over everything. Families were arriving in their finest clothes. Sophia could see parents chatting with each other, students nervously adjusting their performance outfits, and several people she didn't recognize who Maestra Rodriguez had mentioned were important figures in the local music community. Her mother sat in the third row, wearing her best dress, the one she usually saved for church. She looked proud and nervous all at once. Beside her sat Sophia's father, who had taken the evening off from his second job to be here. And next to him, wearing an elegant navy dress that she must have kept from her performing days, sat her grandmother. Alina caught Sophia's eye from across the room and smiled, giving her granddaughter a small, encouraging nod. That simple gesture calmed some of the butterflies raging in Sophia's stomach. "Nervous?" a voice asked from behind her. Sophia turned to find Maestro Rodriguez standing there, looking distinguished in his formal concert attire. "Eyes terrified," Sophia admitted honestly. He laughed warmly. "Good, that means you care. The day you stop feeling nervous before a performance is the day you should worry." He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Remember what we practiced? Don't think about the audience. Don't think about playing perfectly. Just feel the music and let it flow through you. That's what you do best." Sophia nodded, taking a deep breath. The showcase began with several group performances. The Academy's chamber orchestra played beautifully, followed by a string quartet, then a woodwind ensemble. Each performance was met with enthusiastic applause. Then came the solo performances, each student taking their turn in the spotlight. Diego performed a technically impressive piece that earned strong applause. Carolina played a lovely violin solo that showcased months of hard work. One by one, students demonstrated their skills, their training, their dedication to their craft, and then Maestro Rodriguez walked onto the stage to introduce the final performance of the evening. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. "For our closing performance tonight, I'd like to introduce someone very special. 3 months ago, this young lady performed in a classroom and reminded all of us why we dedicate our lives to music. She reminded us that true artistry isn't about expensive instruments or prestigious training. It's about heart, about passion, about the courage to share your soul through sound." Sophia's hands were shaking as she listened from backstage. Tonight, Maestro Rodriguez continued. She'll be performing a special duet. Please welcome Sofia Martinez, accompanied by her grandmother and teacher, Alina Martinez, whose return to this stage after 30 years away is something truly remarkable. The applause began even before Sophia and her grandmother walked onto the stage. Sophia wore a simple but elegant dress that Carolina's mother had helped her find, and her hair was pulled back neatly with a clip that had belonged to her grandmother years ago. Alina walked with quiet dignity, her posture still that of the performer she had once been. Together, they crossed the stage to the beautiful grand piano, positioned in the center. It was large enough that they could sit side by side, which is exactly what they did. For a moment, Sophia looked out at the sea of faces. She found her parents, saw their pride and love shining back at her. She saw her classmates, many of whom were smiling with genuine support. She even spotted Mrs. Delgado sitting near the back, her expression unreadable but no longer hostile. Then Sophia turned to her grandmother, and Alina smiled at her with such warmth and love that all the nervousness melted away. This wasn't about proving anything to anyone anymore. This was about sharing something beautiful with the person who had given her this gift in the first place. "Ready, Mia?" her grandmother whispered. Sophia nodded. Together, their hands moved to the keys, and they began to play. They had chosen a piece that allowed them to weave their parts together, sometimes playing in harmony, sometimes taking turns with the melody, always supporting and complementing each other. It was a conversation between grandmother and granddaughter, told through music instead of words. Elena's playing showed the wisdom and experience of her years, each note placed with the certainty of someone who had spent a lifetime with this instrument. Sophia's playing had the energy and emotion of youth, the freshness of someone discovering the magic of music for the first time. Together, they created something neither could have achieved alone as they played. Sophia glanced at her grandmother's hands. They were older now, marked by time and hard work, but they still moved with grace and precision. These were the hands that had guided Sophia's own small fingers across the keys, that had patiently corrected mistakes, that had shown her how to pour feeling into every note. The music swelled and danced, soft moments giving way to powerful crescendos, then back to gentle passages that felt like whispered secrets. The audience sat spellbound, many leaning forward in their seats. Not wanting to miss a single note, Sophia felt tears on her cheeks but didn't stop playing. These were happy tears, grateful tears, tears of understanding that this moment, this perfect moment of connection with her grandmother, was something she would remember for the rest of her life as they played the final measures. Their hands moved together in perfect synchronization, and the last chord rang out clear and true, hanging in the air before slowly fading to silence for a heartbeat. The auditorium was completely still. Then the applause erupted like thunder. People weren't just clapping, they were standing, giving Sophia and her grandmother a standing ovation that seemed to shake the walls. Some audience members had tears streaming down their faces. Others were smiling so wide it looked like their faces might crack. Sophia's mother was crying openly, and her father had his arm around her shoulders, his own eyes glistening. Students were cheering. Even some of the prestigious guests from the music community were on their feet, applauding with genuine enthusiasm. Sophia and Alina stood and took a bow together, hand in hand. As they did, Sophia looked over and saw something that shocked her. Mrs. Delgado was standing and clapping too, and there were tears running down her face. Their eyes met across the distance, and the teacher nodded slowly, a gesture that carried more meaning than words ever could. It was acknowledgement, acceptance, and perhaps even a silent apology for the assumptions she had made. After the showcase ended, people crowded around Sophia and her grandmother. Parents congratulated them. Students wanted to know when they might perform together again. And several of the music professionals left their business cards, mentioning opportunities and future possibilities. But the moment Sophia treasured most came later, when the auditorium had mostly cleared out. She was helping her grandmother gather their things when Maestro Rodriguez approached with another elderly gentleman. "Alina," Maestro Rodriguez said warmly, "I'd like you to meet Antonio Reyes. He's on the board of the National Conservatory." The man shook Elena's hand with obvious respect. "Ms. Martinez, it's an honor. I remember your performances from years ago. And your granddaughter," he turned to Sophia with a kind smile, "has inherited not just your technical skill, but your gift for touching people's hearts. That's exceedingly rare." He handed Alina a card. "We have a program for young musicians at the conservatory. I think Sophia would be an excellent candidate. Please consider reaching out." After he left, Sophia looked at her grandmother with wide eyes. "Abuela, did that really just happen?" Alina laughed, pulling Sophia into a hug. "Yes, Mia, it really did. But remember, none of this changes who you are. The awards, the recognition, the opportunities, they're wonderful. But the most important thing is tha.